monitoring the chat. So if you do have any questions or need anything clarified, please stop any time along the way. And you can either raise your hand or just drop it in the chat. Encourage people to send love and fireworks, whatever we can do to keep the energy high today. Yeah, I think with that, so today we're just going to give a brief overview of the Homeownership Assistance Program and provide an update on where things are at, where things stand right now. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about affiliate agreements and kind of what that entails to participate as an affiliate. And then we'll spend time doing questions and discussion as folks need near the end. Encourage folks to just raise your hand, like I said, or drop a question in the chat any time along the way. But we'll make sure we do spend some time at the end for questions and answers. So with that, I will turn it over to George, and George can give us an update on where things are at. Take it away, George.
Well, fortuitously, yesterday afternoon, there was a call among all the various state HAP administrators that included representatives from the Treasury who are reviewing all our proposed plans. And we got some updates from them as to what their review process is entailing and what they foresee going forward. No plan has yet been approved by Treasury, so we're all sort of eager to get started. And the feedback was fairly significant in the sense that they said that they look to have comment letters, not approvals, but comment letters relating to the plans out soon, which, given the timing of the call, I'm hopeful means sometime between now and the end of next week, we will receive at least a comment letter with feedback on the plans. They are focused a lot on the things that we have been discussing with you guys about outreach, making sure that we contact and get the word out to everyone, especially in underserved communities. Vulnerability assessments, making sure that people who are in the direst situations get to the top of the list for action to the extent possible. What kind of housing counseling services are being discussed to provide to folks, and also, some process for encouraging at least the applicants to use whatever loss mitigation options are available to them before necessarily these funds are used, because Treasury is concerned about making sure that once people have gone to this process, that whatever situation they end up with is a sustainable one, so that it isn't just necessarily a situation where money is given out and 6 months later these folks are still in foreclosure and nothing's really helped. I don't know. I mean, those are the things they'd like to talk about. I don't know in the end how what is a make or break for them on any of these issues, because, for example, I don't think that they're going to insist that everybody go through a loss mit process and get a letter that said, from the servicer saying, here's the loss mit you qualified for, or you didn't qualify for loss mit before help is given, because that can take forever, obviously. So, these become kind of fairly squishy issues pretty quickly. So I think we're just going to have to see what the feedback is and what follow-up they're going to request from us in connection with these issues. But he did want to sort of highlight sort of the things they're thinking about as they're reviewing these plans. And our plans that we submitted had some discussion of a number of these things, though it is tending toward, as with most states, to a reinstatement kind of situation with, you know, some level of allowing for lost mid or other things to happen, but basically focused on getting the money out the door, which is what, you know, sort of we think our job is. But, you know, so we'll just have to see how that affects process and how that affects timing. As a general matter, just when it comes to timing of when approvals might be given, in light of the fact that it looks like these are going to be some substantive comments, which are going to require substantive responses that are going to have some kind of substantive review. It may be, you know, now, unfortunately, not that anybody wants it, but, you know, end of November before anything actually gets approved. The other issue for Treasury, just on a logistical basis, is the same group of people who are working on this are also working on the ERA and the rental assistance, and they're just moving into ERA 2, which means they are dealing with all the questions that are arising with that. So in some respects, there's only 24 hours in a day for anybody. And, you know, these folks have to deal with a lot of different issues. That is to say that we're still in a holding pattern and we're waiting for some feedback, and we're going to try to be as responsive as we can. And we're hoping still to get our approval, you know, as soon as possible and still be able to start at least receiving applications before year end. But, you know, it all depends on ultimately the kind of things that Treasury decides it's going to want to see from us, and how that can be baked into the plan and baked into the processes that are created associated with that, both with working with legal aid and working with the housing counselors, and just internally with the system that is being created to sort of track all of this and make sure people don't fall through the cracks in some way or another. So that's where we are. It's not particularly satisfying, I know, but that is the situation. One sort of piece of good news about all of this is that he did say that, oh, well, the other thing that's still in the air is the taxability of the benefit. So we still don't know. We still haven't gotten final sort of sign off on these benefits are not going to be taxable. I think, you know, the legal aid folks have made a very good case as to why they shouldn't be. And I am rooting for that. And I think that they may, you know, I don't think that they're wrong, but, you know, the service is the service, and they go through a process, and it goes through OMB, it goes through a number of people before they can officially say those kinds of things. So we're waiting for that as well. The good news is that once the plan is approved, all the money gets released at once. So it's not like we're going to have some complicated process for, you know, getting dollops of cash out from Treasury as we go along. It'll all be done at once. And I see somebody already has their hand up. Barbara Gary's. Did you have a question or a comment?
I do actually.
Some knowledge? Yeah.
So I was on a national call yesterday with the Housing Partnership Network and talking with other organizations across the country who were also doing emergency rental programs, emergency mortgage, emergency utility programs. And this is across the country, some of these programs being pushback has been a thing. So some of the other states, it looks like what they've done to try and help clients be ready for when the funds are available is to do a pre-application and then sort of have a waiting list, so that when the funds are actually available, the housing programs, like I'm at CHT, and that's what I'm worried about, is we're going to get, like, you know, 150 people coming in at one time, all with great need at that moment. And so is there any possibility that we could set up something in Vermont to help triage and do some of this preemptively so that when the money comes, we're not hammered and we're in a better position to help people access the funds? And then the flow through you actually is a little easier as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that is something we're working on. I mean, we're working with our vendor to create the application, the portal, to develop processes for taking paper applications. So assuming that we get to a point where we feel comfortable enough to open that, to the extent we think that, we can at least get through a basic sort of initial eligibility review kind of situation, then yeah, I think we'd like to open it and, start a list. My only concern with that is really a messaging issue to the proposed applicants, because, they're going to have gone through the process of applying. Their issue that created, their need to apply is still going to be there. They're going to be feeling those pressures, and they're going to be, worried and calling and having questions. When is this going to happen? When is this going to happen? When is this going to happen? And we have to, sort of message out that just because you've applied doesn't mean that anything's going to get worked on right away. And, calling VHFA or calling you guys daily isn't necessarily going to get their thing worked on any faster. So that would be sort of the flip side of that, is that we're creating expectations with folks that, will get them, create frustrations that we don't want to necessarily do for people who are already stressed. But I do agree with, I see the benefit of that. And to the extent we do that, then I think we will have to have among all of us a messaging meeting for that, and make sure that, that everybody's getting the same message, and that it's, that we all understand where we are, and how much we can do. But that it will help, once things open up, that if we can have as many people as possible at least set up and pre-approved for eligibility, then I think that would be good.
George, I just wanted to add the other drawback. I understand the benefits of taking applications as soon as we can too, but the other drawback, in addition to getting people's hopes up about how quickly they're going to get the assistance, is that we want to make sure that that what we're asking them to
Right.
Submit during the application process is what the Treasury is going to require. Like, it would be painful to have people apply and then have to go back to them to get other pieces of information, or, like, worst case, like, that program shifts a little bit, like the way that this mortgage assistance is going to be provided shifts a little bit from what we had envisioned because of the final Treasury review of Vermont's plan. So it's so tricky to strike that right balance. But
yeah, I think a lot of this is going to depend on where we are with the review process, what we see their comments being, whether or not it affects sort of that initial intake piece, or really that's more a matter of sort of the processing later. So, that is a balance that we'll all have to strike. And did somebody have a message in the chat?
Thank you, Barbara, for that question. Yeah. Leslie, would you mind?
Yeah.
Yep, Matt was suggesting that this is a really great way of thinking about it. We have to think about how this application, this online portal is arranged, but you can probably all read it. Matt proposed that the pre-application process is like going through airport security, and then you still have to wait at the gate afterwards, but boarding the plane is quicker because you've already presented some of the basics, like your ID and your boarding pass, and that's a great way of thinking about it.
Yeah, and I think that that's how we would have to basically message it, right? You're through security, but that doesn't mean you're on the plane yet, and we may or may not need to come back for more information. But at least, the initial pain of the process is over, and you're not going to need to, and and hopefully the application isn't painful, but I mean, there is always, it just takes time, you know. Tricia has a wait list of folks already that may be eligible. And I think that would be, I don't know if the rest of you are doing the same thing, you know, to the extent that you're getting inquiries.
George, can you actually, on that point, could you talk a little bit about what's happening right now with our site and folks' ability to be able to sign up and get updates?
With our web portal?
With the pre-screening site, I think George, Chad is referring to, George.
The pre-screening site is up, so it is not even a pre-screening to the extent of what Matt was talking about. It's really more a matter of, you know, determine if, you know, you might be eligible for the program kind of pre-screening with a lot of just, you know, self-determined answers. But that is up and going. There's, it was recently revised. It should now have all of the changes that we all talked about the last time with the FAQs and the language changes in that one question I think that we were talking about, plus all of the translations are in. So to the extent that, you know, you want to walk through with somebody, it is in its final form. And if you guys have any feedback on what's there now, that would be, you know, we're happy to take that. FAQs are not all that difficult to add. It's really more if you get into sort of the questionnaire part that it gets a little complicated just because of the way that the programming is. But so it is there and it's available. I think, Leslie, do we have yet sort of an initial round of data on that, like how many people have gone through? And
yeah, I mean, I haven't looked this week actually. Last week it was between 300 and 400 unique visitors to that HAP pre-screening site. You know, distributed around the state, kind of as you'd expect, based on the size, the populations of the counties. So it's been increasing each week. Haven't had a chance to check it again this week yet.
okay.
But it's a great way for potential applicants to get a sense of what this program is and what that very basic eligibility is.
Right.
And a way to sign up for news. We actually haven't sent any news out on that to those subscribers yet because there hasn't been any news. But we're hoping that we'll have something to share soonish.
Yeah.
Great, thank you for that, George and Leslie. So any other questions, clarifying questions on the program itself, or questions or any more details folks need on the update from Treasury?
I just looked at the data on the pre-screening site, and there have been, as of today, 472 unique visitors that went through that pre-screening process.
And actually, Grace just posted a good note for everyone to keep in mind about the extension of the federal backed forbearance programs and the protection that CFPB is providing. I think actually doesn't CFPB have a pretty good web page, Grace?
Yeah, they do. And you can search these rules. There's a new temporary COVID related regulation that basically prohibits, unless a few certain things, specific criteria are met, that covers all types of mortgages, not just federally backed, but many of them are not going to be able to proceed with foreclosure actions until January 1st, unless they've done a complete loss mitigation process with the borrower, you know, and the borrower has been denied and hasn't asked for an appeal. You know, they may be able to proceed with a foreclosure, but in most circumstances, I think servicers who are covered by this rule are going to be waiting probably until the beginning of the year. And we have in our office, I mean, granted, we see sort of a small cross section of foreclosure defendants, but we did see a pretty large wave of cases coming in August. And since then, things have slowed down significantly. So I'm hoping that the rule is doing its job. And I'm sure a lot of the folks at the homeownership centers are familiar with this, but all of the federally backed mortgage programs now have new loss mitigation programs that are streamlined programs for folks who have been dealing with a COVID hardship and or are in forbearance. We know that sometimes those programs don't work the way that they're intended, depending on the servicer of the mortgage, but I'm hoping that all of these new protections will sort of stave off a crisis before HAP is up and running. And I'm hoping that by the time HAP gets going, we haven't seen a big wave of foreclosures yet, and we can avoid a good many of them. That's my hope. And I know you all are also aware that foreclosure is thankfully a fairly long process as well. And we're working with VHFA to finalize a grant that will have us increase our staff to work on foreclosure actions. So we'll hopefully be able to work with a lot of the borrowers that do end up with a case filed against them.
Right, and that's coming out of this. There's a pot of money, of HAP money, that can be used for legal services and also for HUD-approved housing counselor services. And we will, for the 6 HUD-approved housing counselors in the state, we will be reaching out to you guys too about providing funding for counseling, true blue counseling services, over and above, say, just helping somebody fill in an application, which is would be different money. And that would be, more generally among as many of you of the nonprofit entities as well. Somebody else has their hand up.
Great. Yeah, actually, George, that might be a good segue. Barbara, I just wanted to check and make sure your hand is still up. Is that a new question or holdover?
No, that's my bad.
That's all right.
Oh, okay.
I do it all the time. And I did encourage you to do sparkles, fireworks, hearts, all those things. So please send that along. So Georgia, this might be a good segue to go into kind of defining the affiliate, what that entails, and then kind of moving into, if folks are interested in participating as an affiliate, how that might differentiate between a HUD approved counselor.
Right, and actually, Bruce Whitney noted a good point, and I do want to make sure we talk about it, is property tax issues, because obviously that's not CFPB covered. There's no sort of COVID forbearance on property taxes. So, if somebody's going to a tax sale, they have a tax sale issue. But yes, there is the redemption period for anybody who has gone through a tax sale. The one thing that happens, though, obviously, is the cost goes up. The towns charge amazingly high default rates of interest and fees for tax sales. It may be that, and we'll see what the Treasury does, but they may be offering like partial approvals for people, for states, and say, well, we'll approve you for, property charge and property taxes and utilities, but you still got to work with us on how you're going to do mortgages.
Oh, God.
So that just make life that much more complicated. But for folks who are facing tax issues, especially, and utility issues, because the public service utility assistance program, I think, is ending fairly soon. It may be a way to get started, at least for some things, and reduce some of those costs that would go to the program, basically, if we were going to help out, and be able to spread the money a little further without having to spend it all on fees for individual towns. for tax sales. So that is something what we will look at too, is if that would make sense timing wise, if we see the mortgage side getting a little too complicated, but we can get the partial on the other and get that moving. The affiliate agreements. So yeah, there's the housing, the HUD approved housing counseling service that is paid for out of a particular pot of money that's available. Basically I'm kind of using Grace as a guinea pig on those, because a lot of it's going to feed off of how we're setting up our relationship with legal services, and we can try to use that as kind of a pattern for everyone. So once that's kind of set, we'll go out to the 6 HUD approved entities here in Vermont for that. And we've had some contacts with all of you about what you expect, sort of your volumes to be and what you think might be out there. The other would be for just generally would be the application assistance. We had previously with MAP an arrangement with a number of entities to provide application assistance where they would get paid basically $50 an application to the extent that they were helping somebody submit. We had some good use of that. I think that over time, it looked like maybe the $50 really wasn't enough, because it wasn't just a matter of helping somebody out with an application, but helping them find pieces of paper, taking a lot of follow-up calls, going to people's houses because they had mobility problems and other issues. And we are looking at doing an increase or figuring out a way to pay for that. One suggestion was to do an hourly rate. Another suggestion was to just increase the fee generally, with the idea that some of these applications will just be easier than others, and it'll all sort of work out in the end. I think from a administrative perspective, a flat fee is easier to work with. So right now we're looking at increasing it from $50 to $100 per application. That was really sort of that seems about right kind of analysis, but any concerns you might have about that would be great to hear. And also, if any of your entities are available to help with that, obviously that's part of our general outreach for reaching the folks who are the most vulnerable, because they tend to be folks who need a body to talk to that is going to be in Vermont, who has good ideas about housing issues here. I mean, there will be a call center that we have with our vendor, and that can talk people through the application if it's just sort of basic questions. But I know that there are folks who really need some significant hand-holding, and I think it would be better, for them to come through you guys rather than necessarily the call center with the vendor. The other aspect of not having doing a flat fee only is that if somebody really, really is having a lot of issues, they probably really, really need a HUD approved housing counselor. And I would say that if you have somebody with that level of need, they can get flipped over to the other pot of money to be funded with, so that you would get the 100 for the application, but then they would also be getting, to the extent that they are also otherwise eligible for HAP, then they could also get the counseling services, and you can bill that part of it through that side of things. So those were our 2 reasons for looking at a flat rate for the application itself.
Great. So I
Um,
wonder if this would be a good, oh, go ahead, Leslie.
I was just going to confirm for that I'm, that what I think the direction is that there are 3 levels of assistance for the applicant. There is this call center that is going to be, we are imagining provide a lot of support for an applicant. And then there will be application assistance from I'm hoping this group of 17 nonprofits across the state that you are all a part of. And then when somebody needs more assistance, then is you guys are able to provide for the $100 fee, then that, as George was just saying, that indicates that they need something more, perhaps probably counseling. And so then they would shift into that most intensive one-on-one work with the HUD-approved counselor. So really, I just wanted to clarify about those kind of 3 tiers of support for the applicant that this program will include. And this $100 fee was actually based on your feedback, in part from our last meeting, because we had a lot of different suggestions from you all about how to work that. And actually, we're testing our initial version of the web application now, and really are optimistic about a quicker time through the process than maybe the worst case that a lot of us were thinking about.
right. Assuming that there aren't any sort of crazy documentation requirements that Treasury decides on. But that said, I don't know that this application is going to be all that much more complicated than the MAP application. So hopefully, where will the call center be contracted from? Hopefully not out of state. The call center folks are not necessarily in Vermont. So they're going to be call center folks who are basically there to deal with like technical questions about how do you upload documents, or I started an application and I'm trying to get back into it, or I forgot my password, or, general questions about the program, things like that. No, it is not the same call center as VRAP. At least not that I know of. Not that I could make any promises about any of that. But that's
I
good.
think this
Go
might
ahead.
be a good point to just share that I think, the HAP program has the benefit of learning from the mortgage assistance program, which VHFA administered early on in the pandemic, and then also the VRAP program. So I think we're learning through this process, and getting a lot of feedback from you all has been helpful on where we can avoid pitfalls and where we can make improvements.
What would be ideal is if we kick this off and and then reconvene after the program is up and running for 6 months and get your thoughts again about how this is working, like how the amount of time that you're spending with an applicant is faring relative to the $100 an applicant fee, and can sort through why it's more, if it's more, and what kinds of adjustments, if any, are needed. I think that would be ideal to think about revisiting, what can work best for us all once the program's up and running and we've had some time with it.
Right. And I think that that's the other issue with this one versus ERAP, is that the time for the program is a lot longer, and it isn't necessarily a race to get money out the door. And because, as Grace pointed out, the foreclosure process just has its limit, it's not the same thing as as an eviction when it comes to just the amount of time in court, that things don't necessarily have to be, we don't have to jump the gun as much as I think we're kind of forced to with ERAP. So fingers crossed, it will be smoother. So data on how many people behind on mortgage in Vermont right now. We had some data for federally backed mortgages that wasn't necessarily current, didn't we, Leslie?
No, we have data on, it's always lagged a little bit. So it's for the last quarter available. We do get data from a delinquency survey that's done at a national level, but but we know for the state how it's looking, but I'll have to look it up. I'll get back to you later in the meeting.
Okay.
So we're going to ask in just a few minutes if folks are interested in becoming an affiliate, and encouraging folks to put that in the chat. But just wanted to stop here and just see if there's additional questions on what it would entail, and the difference between the HUD approved counseling and an affiliate. So just seeing if anyone else has any further questions on this part.
Well, this is Barbara Gary's at CHT. So you had mentioned you're sort of troubleshooting and doing some of this piece to get ready for this. If you wanted someone from outside or wanted people from outside of VHFA to like walk through the portal to help you troubleshoot, I think we could perhaps take that opportunity to help you with that piece of it, because if we can walk through, because we've been working a lot with folks with VRAP, we understand how that portal is or is not working particularly well. So if you were wanting, to do some demo people, I think amongst this group, you could probably get a pretty willing volunteer cadre who would be helped to, kind of problem solve that.
And that is part of the plan. We're still working on developing the initial portal, but once we get to a point where we're like, okay, this looks like it's kind of gone through, at least internally, what we think it needs to be, we would like to have a chance to have, at least a few of the folks here walk through it and give us any feedback on ease of use, or do we really have to ask this question, kind of things. But yeah, that is part of the plan, which, slows the process of getting the thing out and open. On the other hand, I think, given the realities, I'd rather have something that opens that is that doesn't require a lot of rework later. So I think we want the opportunity to do that before we go live, as they say.
Well, thank you, Barbara, for that offer. And I see in the chat that folks are having some suggestions on what that could look like. So thank you, Bruce.
And I really appreciate folks jumping in and letting us, confirming again that you're interested in helping folks with their applications should they need it for this program. So that's super helpful. Thank you.
Bruce, you had a portal needs a trauma-informed and low to no literacy review. And I guess, can you tell me what your idea is of what that is?
I think our counselors could provide that review to a certain extent. But someone who has been experiencing a lot of trauma in their life and is undergoing acute trauma, worrying about a foreclosure, is going to freak out at certain points in a portal. If there's hard to understand vocabulary, attestation. I did not encounter attestation until I became a national mortgage lending licensed lender, and so there's just certain. So you need to map the vocabulary, be at an understandable level, and just really clear, easy to follow flow would be basics.
Okay. As digestible as possible in small chunks, basically. Yeah. And also not, again, requiring things that are extraneous, and making sure that we limit, the amount of uploads to what's absolutely needed, simply because technical glitches are what they are. And if you're already stressed, it's, pushing the wrong button is easy.
And I think Just keeping the language
Oh.
as simple as possible for folks. You know, keeping the legalese out of things.
But
Makes
there's
it
no such thing as legalese. I'm a lawyer. I can
less
read that stuff all day.
intimidating.
Leaving out jargon like trauma informed and low to no literacy, stuff like that.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's a good segue though, George. Matt at USCRI asked a good question about, helping somebody with the application from being a partner who isn't working on mortgage issues on a day-to-day basis. What kind of training could we provide to help organizations like USCRI who might be able to help applicants with applications, but may have questions about about some of the terms and some of the processes.
Right. I mean, I think we can certainly sit down and work with folks if they have questions. I mean, one of the things we're going to do, like we did with MAP, is do a training where we sort of go through, here's page 1, here's page 2, that kind of thing for anybody who wants that. And obviously questions can be raised during that process. Hopefully, if we are good at putting together an application site that is digestible and readable and makes sense, general knowledge of, if you are a person who owns a house or has a mortgage or just generally, are out there in the world, it shouldn't be that complicated. To the extent that that anyone is finding themselves being posed with questions that they are unfamiliar with, or are seeing that these are things that aren't just sort of general knowledge kind of questions, that would definitely be either a referral to the call center or a referral, telling these folks, well, you really should, when you're applying, ask for mortgage counseling, because those are the people who really have a good sense of not only just the general mortgage servicing world, but also specifically what programs are available, what programs you might be able to fit into, what the loss mitigation processes are. Because I think as an application assistance kind of person, the $100 isn't that much money. So, we're not expecting, people to provide significant help like that. Hope that's an answer.
And at least at this point, the application is, we're trying to make it so that basically anybody who's had a mortgage or owns a home would understand all of the terms that are in the application portal. So we really want it to be that simple for whoever.
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer that folks be able to do it without having any kind of assistance, right? I mean, that they could sit down one evening and in an hour knock it out, because they have what they need handy and they can just take a picture of stuff with their phone and whatever. So that's the hope. And if they have any questions, a short sort of, here's how you do your password from the call center is as much as they need. But there will be people who need more help. And as you guys, I mean, and it is true, these are the folks often who are the underserved, because they do have mobility issues, or because they have technology issues. I think certainly anyone who finds themselves in a position where they have to apply with paper, those are the folks who I'd really want more than anything else to get help from a local entity that can help them walk through the paper requirements, because submitting by paper, you don't get a real quick feedback, right? I mean, you stick it in the mail, you got to wait until somebody gets it and looks at it, and then they mail you something back or call you. I mean, so the more complete a paper application is from this beginning, the much easier it is for everyone, including the applicant, because it just goes through that much faster.
George, could you talk a little bit about an applicant who needs help with translation or interpretation, I mean, we are going to have the application available in the 10 most common languages spoken in the state. But in addition to that, when one of these agencies gets an applicant or client who needs help with translation or interpretation, like for example, CHT, what should they do?
Well, unlike MAP, this application is fully translated. So if you're on the website and you say your language is Arabic, the application language itself will be in Arabic. Or if you say that you're Somali, it will be in Somali. So as opposed to MAP, where we had everything was basically in English, though we did have a translated sort of program description for people to, in their own languages. So hopefully that is not an issue, to the extent that maybe somebody needs help with a language that's not preloaded, and who is looking at the Google Translate version and saying this makes no sense because Google Translate makes no sense, which often it doesn't, especially in some of the less used languages. Then I know that a lot of you all have relations with, say, AALV or some other translation service that you work with. With MAP, we did not have a special sort of setup for that other than the base fee. So if that becomes an issue for cost or whatever, then I think we'll need to discuss that separately. But right now, or historically anyway, that has not been a separate item that we've had to deal with.
I was wondering if AALV or USCRI or CVOEO are more, maybe they have more capacity to work with folks who speak different languages, and we could refer folks there when they walk into a nonprofit that doesn't have the language that applicant needs. But I don't know enough about what those agencies' capacity is.
So
Well,
I
Matt
see
can tell us.
Matt has his hand up. Go ahead, Matt.
Sure. I can't say for certain about what our capacity is because we've been kind of gradually rebuilding from a low level of resettlement over the past few years. But we have been helping some with VRAP, and it's been a lengthy, sometimes difficult process. So I don't know how many individuals would be coming to us or referred to us for help, but I'm pretty sure we could help some. Or we do have an interpretation and translation service, which could be involved. So I think we're interested. I would probably just need to check with our director and some staff and get a sense of how long it might take to help someone apply.
Right.
Yeah, Sandrine had put in the chat that her community ambassadors, CVOEO's community ambassadors, might be able to assist people with English as a second language. They don't speak all languages. CVOEO also does use a phone interpretation line for folks that can't schedule with the community ambassadors. I am very concerned about capacity. We are overwhelmed with VRAP as it is right now. I've got my fuel and utility staff helping with VRAP applications. They will not be able to help with mortgage assistance. It's not the same thing. So yeah, I'm hesitant to put out Chittenden Community Action as sort of the face of CVOEO to help with these, because I just have to be realistic about how many people we're actually going to be able to see, Yeah.
Yeah, and just
I would like to add to what Travis said. This is Asma Bunai. So we have community ambassadors for 6 written languages. They already received questions from the homeowners about if there's any help for that from the community. If they will be able, they for sure can share the information when we have and the application with them when we have it. The ability for helping them filling the application or applying for the program depend on maybe I missed that part, but depend on the application length itself and how complicated it is, and if we will be able to train them in doing that for the community ambassador.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and just also there is the call center itself has translation services. So I know call centers have a bad name, but to the extent that someone needs some assistance and the English is not their first language, they should still be able to call the call center and get help in the language that is most comfortable for them.
Yes. This is Sandrine. I want to add something. The language is not the only need when it comes to filling out that kind of application. There is a process to it that needs to be culturally responsive. That's why Matt and Asma and Travis said it very well, that if the support is needed, we might be able to, but it's a capacity issue that we have. I mean, $100, it's, as you said it, $100, it's quite steep for double or triple service, because you are talking about providing the interpretation, you are talking about explaining in the cultural context what it means, and then providing the information and supporting it through to go through that process. So just to say that if there is anything extra that could be done, is it something that we could discuss? Because what I was about to say, to add to CVOEO, because there are 3 of us that are participating to this call here, is the mobile home residence portion of this assistance program. We have a community that have technological issues. We have seen that with VRAP. I mean, we go to them in person. This is what we usually do. So that's my question about, would you reimburse mileage? Because the $100 will not encompass the expense at this point. The other portion is, with VRAP in the call center, again, yes, I think I'm going to stop with the call center thing, because yes, we are definitely traumatized by that experience with VRAP. But just to go back to the impact that it has on people, because we are talking about mortgages at this point here, the level of training that this call center representatives will have, I hope that this will be taken into consideration, because it's not only answering the phone about technical issues, but it's also being able to make people understand what the issue is and how to actually, find a solution or address it in a timely manner, please. And having people actually on the phone, it's not, we call you back and then all of a sudden it's, a month and nothing is happening. But what I was about to ask you is, will any other expense be considered here for reimbursement? That's my question, because we are more than willing to help mobile home residents, but there is more cost attached to whatever you are offering at this point here for this service.
Okay. So I think I'm hearing 2 specific issues. One is that there are certain folks, especially if they're in mobile homes or even, other places where they have mobility issues, that, if you have to travel to them, that's an additional cost. It's not just, sort of time spent going over an application. And then the other is that often, especially with, but it could be for other folks as well, that it's not just a matter of sort of walking them through the application, but, you know, sort of teaching them about what the issues are, because they're unfamiliar with the situation, with the financial side of things. And, you know, they got a mortgage 20 years ago and, you know, they haven't really been thinking about it. So I think somebody else previously had talked about, you know, maybe adding a premium for certain circumstances, and that may be the way to go with that, right? So we'll have to put our thinking caps on for that when it comes to the application assistance fee. So thank you for sort of laying that out, Sandrine.
So I was just going to say, yeah, thank you for those. Were really helpful questions for us to have. So I think we're just at about time. There is a couple of other questions in the chat, so I'm curious if Leslie or George, we could answer those questions and then follow up with folks who've identified either they want to be, if you haven't yet, if you want to be a affiliate, please put that in the chat, or if you'd like to be considered but still need some questions answered, please put that in the chat, and then we will be able to follow up with folks along with the link to this recording. Any final comments or questions?
I just want to thank the group, especially the folks who made comments in the last couple of minutes, because I think that you raised some great points that we can think about ways to overcome these challenges. And I'm very appreciative of your ideas.
Yeah, for sure. So, and we will get back to you. And if anybody has any, you know, sort of follow-ups that they, you know, thinking about what we've talked about and want to raise any issues, you know, please, you're welcome to email me or Leslie or Chad even, and you know, that we'll make sure that we look at that and that gets put into consideration. And if it's just a question, that we can get a response to you. Karen from CHT, did you have a question? Yeah. Last question?
I just I'm bringing up the topic I brought up last time about it doesn't sound like from what you said today from your meeting with Treasury that this fund will cover an amount that got moved to a partial claim. Like the forbearance came to an end a couple months ago, and you know, they moved it to a partial claim. And I mean, so, you know, I went back and forth with the lender about this, like it would be better for the homeowner to have the HEP fund pay it off than to have it tagged on at the end of the mortgage. But if they have to, like you guys we were going to open in August, and then September and October and November, and it keeps getting pushed down. So they are so close, but they have to take one of these options now.
Right.
So does that mean HAP is off the table for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that from Treasury's perspective, you know, I don't know what that means. You know, we've told them, the feedback to them has been, yeah, lost mid is great sometimes, but the position that people are in after lost mid isn't necessarily one that you would choose for them, especially if you know, as you say, they just add a balance on to the end. You know, it increases the debt. They have to take on a bunch of fees or something. And you know, do we really want to force people in? Is that necessarily a good thing to do the lost MIT? They tend to view it as, well, lost MIT, if they can qualify for it, will put them in a sustainable situation, which basically means a payment that they can continue to make after any HAP payment is made, because presumably lost MIT is a re-underwriting, and they determine that the monthly payment is within the tolerances for the income. So, you know, it's
well, I presume
it's a hard sort of place to be, and it's a value judgment to make.
Right. I mean, I presume people will want both, you know, like
Right.
I have a lot of people coming in now who we're kind of helping them with that CDBG money to pay off anything, you know, accumulated past due, but then they also need loss mitigation to make it easier to go forward. So I
Right,
mean,
and some people need help to qualify for loss mit, right? I mean, you're not, if you have a big outstanding past due balance, you know, you needs to get paid down some so that you can then take the rest of it and stretch it out. I mean, they're so, and then some people don't qualify for loss mit at all, but waiting for that to happen, for them to get the letter, you don't qualify, you know, pay up everything now. That's a long time for some people because they go through different iterations for a while.
right. Even if people use the HAP to pay a past due amount and that just gets the foreclosure thing off their back for a little while and gives them time to sell or whatever, you know, whatever they have to do, that's legitimate also, you know.
Agreed. Agreed. So, and I think they recognize that, and I think that's why they're saying they're not going to make loss mit an absolute mandatory requirement. They want to leave room for loss mit, whatever that means. So we just need to understand where the rubber is going to meet the road on that. I mean, there's a lot of conceptual ideas, but I'm not hearing a lot of this is how it's going to work in real life. You know, this is step 1, step 2, and you know, so hopefully we'll get to that when we start going back and forth with any comments they actually do raise.
So I'll just echo Leslie here and thank you everyone. We're running a little bit late, but I know some folks have some questions, so I just want to make sure. Trisha, it looks like you have your hand up.
I think she's saying no.
No, okay.
It's an old hand, maybe.
All right. So if there's no further questions, I'm just checking to make sure. Again, thank you all for being here today. Your questions and your feedback are so helpful. And we will be following up with a link to today's discussion. And so feel free, and thank you again for everyone that had questions or are willing to be an affiliate. So feel free to reach out to us at any time. And I think with that.
And Grace's point about having a designated staff person for folks to talk to, we'll need to look at that as well. Thanks, Grace, for raising that.
Yeah, that's another idea that comes out of working with VRAP. I know we've had a dedicated person at the vendor for some time, and that seems to be the only way that we can get issues resolved. So having someone really knowledgeable at VHFA that would be that liaison would be really helpful.
Okay.
I see a lot of shaking heads.
All right.
Thank you all so
everyone.
much.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.